I had just pulled through the front gates of my ranch when something felt off. Normally, when I come back from a trip, there's a peaceful silence, the hum of cicadas in the trees, the soft rustle of the breeze across the lake, maybe Duke's excited bark as he comes sprinting to greet me. But that day, the sound of loud, thumping music echoed across the property, carried by the wind like a warning siren. I slowed my truck, my brow furrowing. The driveway that led down toward the lake was littered with tire marks, not mine, and, from the looks of it, more than one vehicle. What the hell? I muttered under my breath, tightening my grip on the wheel as I drove closer. The closer I got, the louder the music became, pounding bass lines rattling the quiet stillness that usually surrounded my ranch. I parked near the edge of the dock path, cut the engine, and stepped out, dust crunching under my boots as my eyes scanned the area. There, perched lazily on my dock like a king surveying his kingdom, was a teenage boy I didn't recognize. Baseball cap turned backward, oversized headphones slung around his neck, fishing rod dangling lazily over the water, and a speaker blasting rap music so loud I could feel it in my chest. For a second, I just stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't some casual fisherman who wandered onto the wrong property. This kid looked like he owned the place. I started walking toward the dock, Duke trotting quietly at my side. "Excuse me," I called out, keeping my voice even. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" The boy glanced over his shoulder, barely acknowledging me before returning his gaze to the water. He didn't even pause his music. "Chill, dude," he said, his tone dripping with teenage arrogance. "My mom said this lake is ours now. She said I could come out here whenever I want. So," he shrugged, casting his line again like he'd done it 100 times. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "Yours?" I asked, stepping closer. "This is my ranch, my lake. Who's your mom?" He smirked, finally pulling the headphones fully off his ears. "Karen. You know, president of the Lakeview HOA. She said you're just being a grumpy old guy who doesn't want to share. But it's cool. She gifted this spot to me for graduating." I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to process the sheer audacity of what I'd just heard. Karen. Of course it was Karen. The woman had been a thorn in my side since the day I bought the place, constantly trying to convince me to join her little homeowners association, enforcing ridiculous rules like approved paint colors and dock hour limits. I'd told her, politely at first and bluntly later, that my ranch wasn't part of her HOA and never would be. Apparently, she'd decided to rewrite reality while I was gone. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Kid, I don't know what your mom told you, but this lake doesn't belong to the HOA. It's private property, mine. You can't just come out here, blast music, and act like you own it." The boy rolled his eyes, his fingers busy scrolling through his phone. "Whatever, dude, talk to my mom if you've got a problem. She said the HOA voted and it's all good." I felt my jaw tighten. The HOA doesn't have the power to vote to take someone else's land. That's not how this works. And that's when I heard it, the unmistakable shrill pitch of Karen's voice, cutting through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Don't talk to my son like that." I turned toward the path, and there she was, Karen in full, suburban warrior, mode. Wide-brimmed hat, oversized sunglasses, clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a weapon, and that ever-present scowl etched into her face. She marched down the slope like a general leading troops into battle. "This," she said, planting her feet firmly at the edge of the dock, "is community property now. We voted last month to expand neighborhood access to the lake. My son is just enjoying what rightfully belongs to all of us." I blinked at her, incredulous. "Karen, you can't just vote to take private property. This lake has been in my family for 3 generations. It's mine. You don't get to rewrite deeds because you held a meeting." Her lips curled into a smug smile. "The HOA has the right to manage common resources. And if you had paid your dues like everyone else, you'd know that. This isn't just about you, it's about fairness." The community agreed. "And frankly, you've been hoarding this land long enough." I stared at her, struggling to believe the words coming out of her mouth. "Fairness? Are you out of your mind? You think you can just declare my lake community property, and give it to your kid as a graduation gift?" Karen's sunglasses glinted in the sunlight as she crossed her arms. "You're outnumbered. Everyone supports this. And if you try to make a scene, I'll have the cops down here so fast your head will spin. I've already told them you've been acting hostile. It won't look good for you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. She had no idea. "Karen," I said evenly, keeping my voice steady even though my patience was wearing razor thin, "you've made a very big mistake." But she wasn't listening. She turned her back on me, waving dismissively as she called out to her son, "Ignore him, honey. He's just bitter because nobody wants to play by his selfish rules." Duke let out a low growl beside me, sensing the tension. I rested a hand on his head, forcing myself to stay calm. Because as much as I wanted to tell Karen exactly how wrong she was, I knew something she didn't. Something that was about to change the entire game. I owned not just the land under that lake, but a controlling stake in the HOA's finances. Every dime she spent came through accounts I had oversight on. And she was about to learn just how bad it could get when you bite the hand that feeds you. I turned on my heel and headed back toward the ranch house, pulling my phone from my pocket as I walked. There were calls to make, lawyers to brief, budgets to review. If Karen wanted a war, she was about to get one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my oak desk in the ranch house, a glass of bourbon sweating on a coaster while the glow of my laptop lit up the room. Every account, every ledger, every expense report for the Lakeview WA flowed across my screen like a blueprint of power they didn't even realize I held in my hands. When I bought the ranch 2 years ago, I hadn't just bought land. I'd quietly acquired several adjacent parcels tied to the HOA's original founding agreements. It gave me a quiet, controlling interest in their budget, enough to oversee and, if necessary, freeze funds. I never used that leverage because I believed in leaving people alone. But after Karen's stunt, claiming my lake as community property, and gifting it to her son, I knew the gloves had to come off. At sunrise, I drove into town. The morning was cool, the lake fog still lingering in thin wisps as I passed Karen's house on the edge of the neighborhood. Her son was out there again, music blaring, feet kicked up like he owned the place. I didn't even stop, not yet. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from my attorney, Mark Sullivan, in his office. Mark was an old friend of the family, sharp as a tack and ruthless when it came to property law. "She did what?" Mark said, incredulous, when I explained the situation. "She told her kid the lake is his now," I said, leaning back in the chair. "And when I told him to leave, she threatened to call the cops. She's under some delusion that the WA voted to make my property part of the community." Mark snorted, flipping through a folder of documents I'd handed over. "This deed is ironclad. She can't touch that lake without your consent. And," he paused, scanning the HOA's original charter I'd printed out, "and you still hold the majority financial interest in their operational budget." I nodded. "Exactly. And I want to make a point. She wants to play queen of the neighborhood. Fine. But I'm about to remind her whose name is on the checks." By the time I left Mark's office, the plan was in motion. Letters were drafted, injunctions prepared. By noon, the HOA's operating funds were frozen pending an internal audit. Nothing malicious, just enough to halt all spending until their financial irregularities were reviewed. I wasn't lying, either. Karen had been sloppy. Half the board already suspected her of dipping into funds for personal landscaping projects and community events that somehow only benefited her friends. Around 3 that afternoon, I parked my truck near the clubhouse, where the WA board was mid-meeting. I stepped inside quietly, my boots echoing across the polished hardwood floors. Conversations died mid-sentence as every eye in the room landed on me. Karen was at the head of the table, her ever-present clipboard in hand, lips painted a sharp shade of red that matched the anger flashing in her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, before I could even speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I placed a thick envelope on the table, right in front of her. "Effective immediately," I said evenly, "all financial transactions for the WA are suspended pending an audit. You've been operating well outside the bounds of your charter, Karen. You've been using community funds for personal use, and as controlling interest holder, I'm freezing every dime until the books are cleaned." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's face turned a blotchy shade of red. You can't do that," She sputtered, slamming her clipboard onto the table. "You're not even part of this WA." I tilted my head slightly, almost pitying her ignorance. "Wrong. I don't just own this ranch and the lake. I also bought the majority stake in the HOA's founding financial accounts 2 years ago. I've been letting you run things because I didn't care. But now, Karen," I leaned forward, my voice dropping just enough for the entire room to feel the weight of my words. "Now, you've made it personal." The treasurer, an older man named Ron, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Karen, is that true? Did you authorize these expenses?" He gestured toward the copies of transactions spilling from the envelope, thousands of dollars in charges, many with her signature, for things like luxury patio furniture and community BBQs that only ever happened in her backyard. Karen's jaw trembled, her voice breaking as she tried to salvage control. This is harassment. He's lying. You all know me. You know I would never." I straightened, my eyes never leaving hers. "You threatened me. You trespassed on my land. You gifted my private property to your son like it was yours to give. That ends today." The room erupted in murmurs, some siding with me, others too stunned to speak. Ron finally slammed his gavel down. "Until this audit is complete," he said firmly, "Karen, you're suspended from all WA operations. We'll be appointing an interim president." The look on her face was priceless, a mix of rage and disbelief as if the universe itself had betrayed her. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I had no desire to gloat. I walked out the same way I came in, the tension in the room trailing behind me. Like a storm cloud ready to burst. Back at the ranch, the boy was still on the dock, though the music was softer now. I stepped onto the wooden planks, my boots creaking with each step until I was standing just a few feet away. "Pack it up," I said simply. He glanced up at me, his bravado faltering when he saw the look on my face. "But," my mom said. "Your mom doesn't make the rules here," I interrupted. "This is my lake, my land. You're trespassing. Don't make me call the sheriff." His mouth opened as if to argue, but one sharp look shut him up. He gathered his gear in silence, the weight of reality finally sinking in. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the lake in shades of orange and gold, I sat on the porch with Duke at my feet. The ranch was quiet again, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the dock. My phone buzzed with messages, some from neighbors thanking me for stepping in, others from board members nervously asking what would happen next. But I ignored them all for the moment, choosing instead to savor the peace I'd reclaimed. The next day, news spread like wildfire. Karen had been officially removed from her position. The audit revealed everything I'd suspected and more. Personal vacations billed as community retreats, fake maintenance expenses, even a slush fund set aside for her son's college tuition. The board voted unanimously to press charges. When the sheriff's cruiser pulled up to her house later that week, I stayed on my porch, watching from a distance as she was led out, still yelling about community rights and illegal takeovers. But this time, no one listened. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in watching someone's pride unravel that way. But there was a deep, steady sense of justice in knowing the ranch, my ranch, was safe, and that the woman who'd tried to take it from me had finally been forced to face the consequences. The following weekend, I hosted a small gathering for the neighbors. Nothing fancy, just some barbecue, cold drinks, and a quiet invitation for anyone who wanted to enjoy the lake respectfully. People showed up, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. There was laughter, conversation, the sound of kids splashing in the shallows while their parents shared stories on the porch. For the first time in months, the ranch felt like what it was meant to be, not a battleground, not a prize in someone else's game, but home. And as the stars began to prick the darkening sky and Duke curled up at my feet, I finally allowed myself to relax, knowing that this chapter, this war, was over.